Well, welcome back. 14 years ago, 20-year-old Amber Tuckero disappeared after a car ride with a mysterious man, leaving behind a chilling recording of what was likely the last moments of her life. Take a listen.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street. We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north to Beaumont. You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city.
In the new season of the Globe and Mail podcast, In Her Defense, 50th Street, our next guest digs into Amber's case and tries to find answers to the many questions that are still plaguing her family and community. Please welcome back to the show journalist and podcast host, Jana Pruden. Thanks for being here. So Jana, I understand that it was actually hearing that recording that we all just heard of Amber's final moments was what really drew you to this case. What was it in particular that struck you about it?
Yeah, I was at the original police press conference in 2012 when the RCMP took this really unusual move of releasing this really shocking and disturbing piece of audio tape. And it struck me that day. I remember the room full of people and how we reacted, and it has stayed with me ever since. And there's two parts of that. One is hearing Amber becoming more and more afraid and more aware of what's happening to her. And the second is hearing the voice of this man, the man that we do presume to be her killer, and how cold and callous he sounds. And that voice has been in my head ever since. I have a friend that lives on 50th Street, and every time I go near 50th Street, I can hear him saying that. And I really wanted to take on this story as a podcast.
Just how calm he is, knowing what he's presumably about to do. What do we know about the last moments of Amber's life?
Yeah, what we know is that she had traveled from her home in Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, to outside of Edmonton, where she was staying in a motel with a new girlfriend that she'd met. She had a baby. She was 20 years old. She'd left her baby with her friend, and she got into a vehicle with an unknown man trying to get a ride into the city. And that's where this recording comes from. I spent many years wondering how they came to have this recording. And one of the things we now know is that she was on the telephone with her biological brother, who was in jail at the time. So calls in custody are recorded, and that's how this call came to be recorded. And it was ultimately discovered by the police many months after she was reported missing by her family.
When Amber's mom first reported her disappearance to the police, there were several things that didn't happen that are actually vital in a missing persons case. Can you walk us through some of those errors?
Yeah, what we heard in Amber's case is something that we've heard all too often in cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, or women who are sometimes called high risk. Now, I don't like that term. I prefer to say vulnerable or preyed upon. And so what we heard is that her mother, Tootsie, told us, the police told her that Amber was probably out partying and she would come back. This is something we've heard in so many cases. Don't worry about it. And they didn't take her disappearance seriously. So they didn't speak to the friend that she was with. They didn't go to the motel and talk to people there. That's an area, it's near the Edmonton airport, lots of people coming and going. They didn't get any security footage, CCTV footage. We know some of us may have watched shows called The First 48, where we know that's such a crucial period of time, and none of that was done. Her belongings weren't picked up from the motel for months. And by the time they went and got her suitcase, the police photographed it and then they mistakenly destroyed it. So we can think about all of that evidence that was lost, all of that time that was lost, and what that would mean for the investigation going forward.
Jane, I cannot imagine the frustration of the family and friends and the community of knowing that none of that happened. But then they have this recording. You have this recording. It is extremely rare to have a piece of evidence like this. And many people thought that having this, well, you know, the alleged killer's voice on that recording would be a slam dunk forensically, but that was not the case.
No, and you're exactly right. That's what the police thought.
Yeah.
After all of these early mistakes, well-documented early missteps, they find this recording and it seems like a forensic slam dunk. You're gonna release it, someone's gonna recognize it, and then you're gonna find the person. And we all know we can call the bank now and they can recognize that it's me when I'm calling in, so it seems very simple. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to take on the story for the podcast. I thought, well, obviously no one's found the right voice yet, and if we can give this this a bigger platform, someone will recognize it. But what I learned is it's far more complicated than that, and that after all these years, police have now determined that the tape has almost no value. And that's a very, very hard thing for the family to deal with, and was really surprising to me.
It has no value because why? Because they can't match the voice?
Because forensically, it's just not possible to connect it. They've sent dozens of samples of men's voices. I'm getting tips almost every single day from people who think they recognize the voice, and it just is not sufficient to actually match it up.
This is why people need to listen to this podcast and share it, because somebody's going to recognize that voice. I have hope. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to talk about the fact that Amber's remains were found 2 years after her disappearance, and they were found in a rural area outside of Edmonton. And her remains were found near the remains of 4 other women, which suggests that there's a lot of theories that think there was a serial killer involved. What do we know about that?
Yeah, at the time she disappeared, there was actually a task force working in Edmonton because there had been, they started with between 70 and 90 cases of missing and murdered women, many of whom shared commonalities. The area where Amber was found, there's 5 women found in very close proximity. And I did talk to one of the world's top geographic profilers who feels quite confidently that those cases might be linked. But of course, no one has been charged, so we don't know.
The RCMP, they ended up issuing an apology, didn't they? What struck you about that apology?
What struck me was that Amber's case is very specific to her, obviously, but that she is an example of so many patterns that we've seen in so many other cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, vulnerable women, preyed upon women, that they're not taken seriously by police. We saw in British Columbia, many people may recall the serial killer Robert Pickton, who claims that he killed 49 women really before police started to take it seriously. So in telling Amber's story, that's one of the things that we also want to do is help bring awareness to this and hopefully make change for other women.
So it's been 14 years, and Amber's family and friends continue to work around the clock to get answers about her murder. Having spent so much time with them, just in these last few seconds, like, how would you describe their level of hope that they have today?
They are truly remarkable people in how they are fighting for Amber and how they are fighting for other women. I recently covered a case where a man was identified as a serial killer who killed 4 women in Calgary in the 1970s. So 50 years later, technology changes, people come forward, and they're hopeful, and I'm hopeful as well that one day this killer will be identified.
Jana, thank you so much for being here today and the work that you do. It's so important. You can listen and share In Her Defense 50th Street right now, wherever you find your podcasts. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey, you, come a bit closer. We've got so many more must-see interviews, spicy debates, lifestyle tips, and pop culture moments. So subscribe to our channel by tapping the logo below and don't miss out.